Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, Oxfam warns that the killing of over 7 aid workers in South Sudan, could slow down humanitarian operations in the country. Also, a crucial peace summit in Mali hits a hurdle when it's boycotted by opposition parties. The stay-away highlights deep-rooted divisions between the government and the militia it relies on for security. And Nigeria is struggling to meet local demand for coconut. But all that could change as the government boosts efforts to diversify agriculture. But first, the death toll of a fatal attack on aid workers in South Sudan has risen to 7. The victims were ambushed and killed on Saturday whilst in a food convoy travelling from Juba to the town of Pibor near the Ethiopian border. It was the deadliest assault on humanitarian staff in the country since its 3-year civil war began. It's still not clear who was responsible, but the UN said that the killings may constitute a war crime and has called on all warring factions to respect aid workers' neutrality for the greater good.
Since the beginning of this conflict in December 2013, we've had almost 80 aid workers who have been killed. Now, every time an aid worker is killed, it is also thousands of people who depend on the delivery of aid from that aid worker who will not get their aid anymore. So it has a ripple effect. It is, of course, a tragedy for that person and a family and colleagues, but it's an even larger tragedy for all those hundreds of thousands of people who are in need of the aid that they provide.
Well, South Sudan's war has caused a man-made famine, and with the rainy season around the corner, food aid is now even more urgent. The risks could slow down the arrival of supply as agencies reevaluate how they do things. Oxfam has said that deliveries would continue, but that they could be delayed in the wake of the weekend's attack. Well, earlier I spoke to Chalice McDonough from the World Food Programme's East Africa division. I asked her about whether she thought the attacks would affect agencies' reach in South Sudan.
The issue that we're facing is much larger than this one terrible attack. It's really not a question of this incident as much as it's a question of sort of repeated and constant violence, harassment, and obstacles that are put up to humanitarian agencies and aid workers trying to get assistance to people and threatening the lives and the safety of the people that we're trying to assist. So it's not, this one attack is less of a concern than the fact that this is not an isolated incident. It's something that's happened far too often and already taken far too many lives.
So clearly in a conflict zone like South Sudan, aid agencies like yours are clearly aware of the dangers. How do you find that balance between planning for the risks and relying on guarantees from relevant parties on the ground?
Well, it's an excellent question, and it's something that we're constantly evaluating and constantly sort of weighing and trying to overcome those obstacles, because the absolute critical factor is that there are people who are in enormous need, and their lives are depending on our ability to reach them, and we're willing to sort of pull out all the stops and do whatever we can to reach them safely, but it has to be done in a way that doesn't endanger the aid workers who are trying to reach them, and most critically doesn't put the people we're trying to assist in further danger. So it's a careful negotiation that needs to happen from the very most senior levels of both sides of the conflict all the way down to the parties on the ground. And that's something we're working at around the clock to make sure that we can try to reach as many people as we can.
Chalice McDonough there speaking to me a little earlier on. Well, neighbouring Sudan said that it will open a humanitarian corridor for food aid to famine-struck communities in South Sudan. The two neighbours split back in 2011. Khartoum's also reportedly arranged for a delivery of 10,000 tonnes of the staple food of sorghum from central Sudan to Bentiu in Unity State. The move's been welcomed by the UN, which says it will speed up deliveries. South Africa's currency took its biggest plunge since last November on Monday on news that President Jacob Zuma had ordered his finance minister home from an overseas investor roadshow. The rand tumbled more than 3% against the dollar over Pravin Gordhan's recall. Pretoria didn't give a reason for the move, but it did spark fears of an imminent cabinet reshuffle. Gordhan's seen as a safe pair of hands, but has an uneasy relationship with President Zuma, and financial markets are twitchy over the idea of his removal. He's due back from London on Tuesday. In Mali on Monday, a national summit expected to enshrine a 2015 peace deal that ended nearly 3 years of civil conflict hit an unexpected hurdle. Major political and military actors stayed away, as our correspondents tell us more.
As this conference room filled up, some chairs remained stubbornly empty. The former rebel coalition and the political opposition decided to boycott these talks aimed at rebuilding a national dialogue. The Malian president didn't spare any criticism in a speech that attacked their absence.
Everyone can look to their own soul and conscience to ask how these acts help enrich democracy, how these acts contribute towards the development of the Malian nation. I would fail in my duty if I did not condemn these absences and the arguments made to justify them.
It wasn't expected that any armed group who signed the 2015 peace accord would attend, but one group did eventually show.
There were two essential things that are important for us. First, we don't want this conference on national reconciliation to simply stop at the end of a few days with a charter called a national understanding. The second is that this has to be an ongoing process.
There won't be a former national reconciliation charter adopted at the end of this meeting, but there will be a list of recommendations about moving forward. And for now, they won't include the input of former rebel groups or the political opposition.
This conference on national reconciliation is just the beginning of the process. People can join in at any point. It's too soon to start talking about failure. I believe that other actors will become part of this process.
After his provocative opening gambit, the Malian president opted for a more conciliatory tone, calling on all parties to join the discussion.
A Tanzanian rapper accused of disrespecting the presidency has been released. Newa Mitego was arrested on Sunday after his latest Swahili language release questioned freedom of speech in the country and criticised its leadership. Insulting the president is a criminal offence, but the artist's release was reportedly ordered by President John Magufuli. His opponents accuse him of becoming increasingly authoritarian, although foreign governments have praised him for his anti-corruption drives. Well, despite having ample land for farming, Nigeria is struggling to meet local demand for coconuts. That could change, though, and coconut traders are hoping to crack the sector wide open by taking advantage of government efforts to diversify the economy.
Located in Nigeria's commercial capital, Lagos, Green Sprout Industries is one of many startups hoping to benefit from a boost in the country's agriculture sector. Started in 2016 by two friends, it supplies fresh coconut water to clients in Lagos, Port Harcourt and Abuja. Co-founder Ise Aigbogun says there's a huge market for coconut products in Nigeria.
The last 2 years or so, we've seen this upsurge in coconut byproducts. We've seen coconut oils everywhere. We've seen people make soaps from coconut oils as well. That's only going to grow. But we have to make sure that we have enough coconuts in Nigeria to meet the demand that's out there.
Coconuts are grown in the country's coastal areas, but Nigeria is yet to invest in the business. The African nation has 1.2 million hectares of arable land, but only about 36,000 hectares are cultivated. Poor infrastructure remains one of the major obstacles to boosting agriculture.
Between $1 billion and about $2.5 billion is what's missing, or what exists that we can tap into, which we are not tapping into because the market is very huge. You have the largest market in Africa and about the top 10 markets in the world. So the market is there. What we just need to do is to help stimulate production.
Nigeria announced a new plan to diversify its economy earlier this year. But a lot of work still needs to be done. Agriculture accounts for less than 10% of the country's exports.
Well, that's it for Eye on Africa. Thanks very much for joining us. Do so again. Take care.
You love watching France 24 in English.
Analysis from France 24. I'm Mark Owen. These are the main world news.
To the border with Algeria.
Huge lines since this morning to answer that question. But France 24 is also available in French.
14h à Paris. Bonjour à tous. Bienvenue si vous nous rejoignez sur France 24 Paris.
And Arabic.
شعبية هذا الباب القادم من أمريكا الجنوبية في ازدياد.
Also coming up.
Featured on cable and satellite systems and online media in France and across the world.